can't say, well, if you do this, thinking they will never do it. Because I had that experience with a terrible movie I did called Racket with Bert Convy and Linda Day George and Edie Adams and Phil Silvers. And a lot of really good people wasting their time. It was Tanya Roberts' first picture. And I had, a couple of scenes, and it was fine. Anyway, they wrote the director. I'd worked with him when he was a choreographer, David Winters, and they called me and they said, David really wants you to do this. And I said, well, what is it? And they said, well, it's just a couple of scenes. It'll be one day. I said, no, I'm not. At 10 years in the business, I'm not doing that anymore. So go away. And then they wouldn't take no for an answer with my agent. And he kept saying, they just really want you. And they keep offering more money. I said, I don't want to do it. I said, I'm just beyond that part of my life. And they kept, so the agent finally said to me, what would it take? Because they're not stopping. He said, would you accept star billing in the front credits, your own card, and your name on the poster, and triple what they're paying you? I said, of course I would. Thinking they would never do that, and they did it. I'm on the poster. I'm in the movie for 5 minutes. But me and Phil Silvers are on the poster, and I'm all right with that. But you have to, I said, and there are other things I said, I don't know if any of this is interesting to anybody, but I remember two things. My agent called me and said the director of, they're doing a sequel to Rich Man, Poor Man as a TV movie, Beggar Man Thief, and all-star cast. And there's one little scene, and the director, who I'd worked with in a commercial, really wants you. He thinks you're the only one who can do this. Is because really, he wants somebody funny in the scene. And I said, well, one scene? And they said, yeah. I said, I don't want to do it because I don't want to do it. And they said, oh, they really want you. And I said, I don't want to do it. And I said, who's the scene with? Which was my mistake. And they said, Gene Simmons, the actress, not the roller. And the minute they said Gene Simmons, I said, when and where? Because who wouldn't? And I loved her so much. And the other thing was, the same situation, was my manager called with an appointment for Angie, the TV series Angie, with Robert Hayes and Donna Pescow. And it was like, it was like all those Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley kind of series. I went because they said to go. And you didn't, in those days, you didn't get the script in advance. You went and got the sides. And I got the sides, and I'm looking at these sides, and I'm going, there's no lines. There's one line. And I called my manager and said, I'm leaving. I'm not doing one line. I'm not doing one scene. I don't want to do it. She said, you are staying there, and you are doing it. Try reading it and not looking for the dialogue. She was really tough, my manager. I said, fine, whatever. So I read it, and it was all physical, reactive comedy, which I love more than anything, of course. So I got it. I read it. Nobody can do that stuff like I used to do it. And I got it, and it was one of the greatest things I ever did. I mean, it's so funny to this day because it came out on DVD, and I hadn't seen it in 40 years, and it's really funny. But it's all reactions. I didn't have to learn anything. I had one thing where I do a singing telegram, and that's about it.
Wow.
So that turned out to be great. And then they talked about bringing me back. I never think it went off the air or something, but you never know. The point is, you never know.
Oh, that is fascinating. How interesting is that?
But I never minded one scene because that's the way I started off in the Partridge Family. If it was a great scene, I did a thing called, what was it called originally? I think it was called Circle of Fear originally. And it was in it was in 71, I think. And they called and they said, it's just a short scene, but go in and read for it. And I read for it, and they liked me, and I got it. But the scene was with Patricia Neal, and right after, it was the first job she did after recovering from her many strokes.
Yeah.
And so, oh my God, Patricia Neal, how can you not want to run lines with Patricia Neal? I worked with some really great folks.
One lady you worked with was Dorothy Loudon.
Many times, as in her recordings.
And isn't it ironic that she was the star in The Fig Leaves Are Falling, which was
I know with David,
David's first Broadway show. Did she ever talk to you about that?
No, and that stuff never came. Had I realized it, at the time, I would have told her I used to do the show. But she did, I think we did 3 or 4 albums where she appeared. And I loved her. Oh my God. It was a real love affair, Dorothy and me. And she just trusted me because I got, some actors, whether it's film or TV or in a recording studio, are wary of someone they don't know. And rightfully so, because is the guy an idiot or what is he going to say to me? I don't know. And she was struggling with what eventually killed her, I think, some kind of bronchial infection, which I think was much more serious than she let on. And she was just struggling the entire day. It was a studio cast album of a new musical. And I got her through to the end, and she just loved that I was gentle and said, don't worry, I'm doing multiple takes. I will piece together and I will handle you with TLC. So she already liked me, but we got to the last thing in the show that she did, and it was a sung line that was musically not good, I will say, difficult. And she could not do it, and her voice was like totally gone. And I turned to the composer, and she was in the studio, and I turned to the composer in the booth, and I said, you know what? Never liked it. Never liked that line sung. It's a beautiful line. The people know that line from the movie. It was a musical version of Night of the Hunter. And the rest of the score is beautiful, but that line couldn't be sung. It's not a sung line. Classic Lillian Gish line from the movie. And I said, and we're never going to get it. We're going to be here till midnight if you think we're ever going to get it. And we're not going to get it, and it'll be terrible. He said, well, do what you think is best. So I walked in, and I just whispered to her. I said, speak it. And she looked at me, and she went, oh, thank you. And did it, and it's so beautiful on the album. She just does it so beautifully. She was a great gal. And, I was living in New York. I lived in New York for a year in 1969. And I think that show played while I was there. And I did not, for whatever reason, because I became known as a record producer for doing songs from flops.
Yes.
And I never saw them. There were so many flops in that year. So many, and I've recorded songs from all of them pretty much. But I wouldn't go. I guess it cost so much. It was $10 or something, or $12 for the orchestra seats. And that was so much money. So I only wanted to see the hits. So I never went to La Strada, and I never went to The Fig Leaves Are Falling, and I never went to Dear World with Angela Lansbury, and all of these humongous flops. But I did discover, I'll tell you when I discovered The Fig Leaves, was in the 70s. I didn't connect him with it ever until much, much later, but I got a 45, I used to collect 45s. I would go to stores, thrift shops, rummage around, anything from a show. And I got one called Did I Ever Really Live? Steve Lawrence, I think, sang it. And it said From the Fig Leaves Are Falling. And it was a great song. I mean, gorgeous song, older male. And then, and I always wanted to record it. I never did. We did it in a Kritzerland show. And Dorothy had a great song called All of My Laughter. But I don't know what David did in the show. I don't know if he sang, I don't know if he had songs or.
Yes, he did feature, but you can certainly hear his young vocals in the background.
Yeah.
And that.
What a great way to start, though. I mean, my God. To just get a Broadway show right off the bat. I mean, what was he, 17?
18, yeah, because it was January 69.
Well, if it was 69, I was there, because I got there in December of 68. And what an adventure that was.
Being in New York.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And failing miserably. It was what a time that, and New York was so New York then, where it was dangerous, it was scary, but there was something about it that is forever missed by me. To walk down 42nd Street in those days, it was so sleazy and slimy, but like it is, if you ever saw Midnight Cowboy, that's exactly what it is. And oh my God, you take your life in your hands if you went to a movie theater on 42nd Street, which I did because they were cheap. 50 cents or something. But, to walk the Broadway, and, there were major movie theaters on 2 or 3 on every block, none of which are there anymore.
Right.
Not a single movie theater is left. Mm-hmm. It's amazing, really.
That's
every side street had multiple movie theaters, none. But, because I saw all the big hits that year. So that was fun. But I didn't act. I went up. I remember I had an audition for George M., which was on Broadway at the time, which I had seen. And it went great. I sang well. I read well. And then they said, do you tap dance? And I said, well, I could tell you yes, but you would find out. No, and you had to tap dance in that show. Because I think I would have gotten in otherwise. I did a Stop the World, I Want to Get Off in Summer Stock. And still I'm in contact with 2 people from that who were in it with me. And one is named Ann O'Donnell, who is still an actor, and Anna Lee Rossi, I think is the other. So that was a time, and my ex-wife, my then wife, was pregnant with our daughter. And we watched the moon landing while we were doing the show, on our off night from the show. But I liked it, New York, but it was very tough if you didn't have a lot of money then and now. And we didn't live in New York proper. We lived in Brooklyn and Flatbush. But I wish I'd seen the Fig Leaves Are Falling. That would have been fun. Or talk to them about it, but what did I know?
Mm-hmm. When you were growing up, you said that you were enthralled by television, but also the musicals. Was there anything that you learned just by watching the musicals that you took with you through your career?
I would have seen Singin' in the Rain, which I love. And I remember seeing it in the theater. So that was 52. I was all of 5 or 4 or something. I used to go to the movies alone, even at 4 or 5. Your parents would drop you off. They didn't care what. I saw Carousel and the movies and King and I always enjoyed them, but they weren't like a huge thing with me until I started actually seeing, I take that back because Bells Are Ringing, I loved as a movie, even though it's not a good movie. I just loved her, Judy Holliday. So I remember loving that. But I was mostly, I loved mysteries. I loved like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Those were, but Little Abner. I think Little Abner was the movie that did it for me. That was 1959.
What was it about that movie? I
don't know, other than it was absolutely fall out of your seat funny, and I was totally in love with the leading lady. I mean, to this day, if I could meet Leslie Parrish, whose name wasn't even Leslie Parrish, it was Marjorie Helen, apparently, but, and I created a little, I always call my first 3 books thinly veiled fictions, in which they're totally my life. I mean, it's all true, but I got to do a couple of things that I wished had been true. And my mother, without telling me, a friend of hers took her to the set of Little Abner at Paramount. And so she saw a scene being filmed. And she told me what the scene was, so when I saw the movie, I knew what. And after I saw the movie, I said, what kind of mother are you? I had a very bad relationship with my mother. I said, this is not what a mother does. You take your kid if he loves the movies to the set. So in the book, my first novel, Benjamin Kritzer, I did get to go to the set. Benjamin goes to the set and meets Leslie Parrish.
Yes.
And is smitten with Leslie Parrish. And I saw that movie like 6 or 7 in the days when nobody did that, because the theater where it played, the Wiltern, was just around the corner from a restaurant my father owned, a very fancy steakhouse. So I would go with him to work on a Wednesday in the summer and get a turkey sandwich from the kitchen. They would make me a turkey sandwich and wrap it up. And I would go to the Wiltern and see the movies at the Wiltern at the first show. Little Abner, I stayed through the second feature and saw it again. And then I went back like 4 or 5 days in a row. Because it was a quarter, or something, 35 cents, 50 cents to get in.
My mum adored the movies, and she would go to the matinees and stay for the evening show, and then she'd go back the following day after day after day just to see her favourite film. And her film was The Jolson Story.
Well, I loved, and that's the other thing. I saw the Jolson Story in that year, in 59. 59 was the year this all happened, because I remember it was every great movie that I loved that year, like North by Northwest came out that year at that same theater, Little Abner. But Little Abner, I just loved the songs. I bought the album. But also we had a thing here called $1 Million Movie on Channel 9, where they would show the same movie 3 or 4 times a day for a week.
Wow.
So you would be able to catch it whenever you wanted. And one of those films, and I was obsessed with it, and even bad movies. That's how I saw Godzilla for the first time. But one of the films was the Jolson Story. That was a life changer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Total life changer. It did imitations of him. I will not say what I did to be like him, because it's not politically correct. Tough beans. It was 1959, and I was 11 years old. I loved Al Jolson. I loved Larry Parks. And I later became very good friends with Larry's wife, Betty Garrett, and his son Andy Parks and Garrett Parks. But I just loved that. So I would imitate. I won a talent contest doing it.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Wow.
at the Pan Pacific Theater in 1959. And I would do my little Monday night. Every other Monday night we had a family dinner at our house. And I would always do my variety show, my Jew version of the Ed Sullivan Show, except I was all the acts. And I did Jolson there. And so that was a seminal year. And then in 1960, in June, I left LA for the very first time to go to St. Louis with some waitress who worked at my father's restaurant. I was friends with her son. They took me to St. Louis, and during that trip, they took me to the Muni, which is this humongous 2,000-seat outdoor theater, to see a musical called Rosalie, which I don't remember anything about except that I've seen the cast list, and of course, many famous people were in it. So, because I looked it up on the line, the internet is good for something, and I loved it. And I have not seen Rosalie since. I have never heard a recording of Rosalie, but I can sing you the title song now.
Go ahead.
Rosalie, my darling, Rosalie. It's one of those things you never, ever forget. And then I came home, and the polar opposite, I got back somewhere in July, early July, and Psycho opened, and I had just read the book on the plane. And so I went to the opening matinee of Psycho with a full house at the El Rey Theater on Wilshire Boulevard. And to go from Rosalie to Psycho is so traumatic. And Psycho was also a life changer in ways, in that I will never take a shower in a tub without the lights off. And then in 61, I started going to theater regularly. Saw a lot of plays, but I saw the national tour of The Unsinkable Molly Brown with Tammy Grimes, and Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, all these musicals. Although I never saw the great musicals that came to LA, my parents never took me to a music. I couldn't believe. I go back and I'm on this site called newspapers.com, and I look at what was here. Little Abner was here with all the original people who were in the movie. Did I see it? No. Sound of Music was here. They were all here. Bye Bye Birdie and How to Succeed. And so the only musical I saw was Molly Brown, and then that's the only musical I saw in that theater. I never went to the Philharmonic Auditorium, which is where all the big ones played. I mean, Ethel Merman and Gypsy was here. Yeah. Where was I?
Oh.
How horrifying is that?
Can you look back and see that there was a path that you were perhaps destined to take?
Yeah.
To work in the field that you are now?
Yes. From my earliest memory. I talk about it in one of the books. But I used to get up in the morning. I'm talking when I was 3 or 4. And I made a movie camera out of the cardboard in my father's shirts that would come back from the dry cleaners. And I taped together what I thought a movie camera looked like. And I would literally hold it and film myself getting out of bed and think I was in VistaVision and Technicolor. And I did this for way too many years. And I would take it out on the street like I was doing a TV broadcast. And I made a little fake microphone to hang around my neck. And it was, I don't know what people in my neighborhood thought of me. But I always loved music. We had 78s of Oklahoma, the ones everybody had, Oklahoma, Carousel, Danny Kaye. And also my father owned a bunch of bars, little sleazy bars. And I would go with him to see the money from the bars. That's why I don't drink, because you grow up with that smell and it's just disgusting. But they all had jukeboxes. So when I started going with him at 4 or 5, they were still 78s really in the jukeboxes. So I would get all the cast-offs. And then I would get, when 45s came in 53 or 4, I got all the 45 cast-offs.
Wow.
And still have some of them.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I have Pancho Lopez, which was this Hispanic version of the Davy Crockett song about a lazy Hispanic Mexican. Pancho Lopez. It was really funny.
Do you have a jukebox, though, to play them in?
I do not. I don't even have a record player anymore. People drive me crazy with this vinyl obsession. I was so grateful never to have to play a record again without ticks and pops. And there's still some things that haven't been on CD yet, but
I'm intrigued about your fascination with Guy Haines.
Well,
from the Hitchcock movie Strangers on a Train.
Well, what can we say about Guy Haines that we haven't said already? Well,
for anyone who's listening who doesn't know who he is.
Well, for years, I would never cop to it. I would never acknowledge it. If people came up to me and said, "We know you're Guy Haines," I don't know what you're talking about. They'd say, "Well, come on. He's on all your albums. You never see his face." I said, "He sleeps with the producer. I don't know what to tell you." So I'll tell you briefly, it's not that I have an obsession. I love Strangers on a Train, the film, but it's not my favorite Hitchcock. But I was doing an album, one of the first albums we did, called Unsung Musicals, which were good songs from flops. And we had found a song called Her Laughter in My Life by Maltby and Shire, David Shire and Richard Maltby. I think they kind of wrote it for Barbra Streisand, and she didn't record it because she had recorded their song Starting Here, Starting Now. And he was her piano player, David Shire, for years. If you watch, I hired a friend of mine to sing it. And as sometimes happens, it just wasn't he thought he was, a perfect match for it, but I was not getting what I knew we needed for the song, which was simplicity. We did more takes than I've ever done with anybody, because I'm pretty good at comping vocals to make a decent track. And then he said, "I know I haven't given you what you want. Please leave the tape here." In those days, there were 24-track, big, thick tapes. And he said, "I'll do it. I'll get it right." So we left the tape there, which I never would do again. He did 8 takes more and sent it, and it was the same. We tried to comp it, and it did not work. So I was the only one who knew the song. So I went in and sang it. Simply, and because it was an early album, I did not want to take credit because I didn't want it to seem like that's what I was doing vanity stuff. So I said, what would be a good name to use? And Strangers on a Train happened to be on one of the cable channels or something. And the minute I heard Guy Haines, I said, it sounds vaguely gay, and I love the name. And so Guy Haines was born and never stopped. The interesting thing is, the actress who plays the wife of Guy Haines in the film, who is called Laura Elliott, later changed her, he started using her real name, which was Casey Rogers, and she was on Bewitched all the time as Casey Rogers. Nobody knows this because nobody recognizes her. Right. But she was Laura Elliott as Mrs. Guy Haines. That awful woman, if you remember the movie, gets killed. She's the villain.
Yes.
And not the villain, but she deserves her fate, I suppose. And years later, I met her, Casey Rogers, at a signing shit. We were all doing signing stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Oh my God, my wife, you're here." And we laughed so hard. She laughed so hard. And I have an 8x10. She gave me a photo. So we became very good friends after that. She came to my house, I came to hers. But she gave me a photo as her as Mrs. Haines, saying, "To my wonderful husband." It's a very funny.
That's priceless.
Yeah, it is. It is. I have to frame that. I have to find it and frame it. It's somewhere.
There's that link with Bewitched and Tabitha, the pilot.
Yes, who knew?
It's a small world, isn't it?
Who would have known that? I had never watched a single episode of Bewitched when I got the show, the pilot, and so I didn't know anything about it really. But except the original pilot that we did was created by the Bewitched guy, William Asher, who was married to Elizabeth Montgomery, and I was the first person they cast because I was coming off all of a lot of stuff, and it was after Nudie Musical had been made. So I don't even know if I think I probably read once. There was no network, no nothing in those days. I just got it, or they watched the movie, or I don't know. So I got it, and then I was asked to read. I don't think maybe I even tested with a couple of people, but I know I read with several Tabitha candidates, including some who should have done it. One of whom was, as you know, Susan Day. I didn't read with Susan, but they were really, she was on the top of the list. And when I saw her name, I said, "Give it to her, for God's sake. Give it to her. I've worked with her a bunch. We just have incredible chemistry. It'd be great." I think had she done the original pilot, we would have sold instantly because it was a year after Partridge went off.
She had such a successful career. And
yes.
I can remember watching LA Law, and I sat there somewhat mesmerized by her character, Grace.
Yeah, she was great.
I thought, I know who she is. Who is she? And of course, when the credits came up at the end, I went, well, there you go. And I thought she was mesmerizing in her screen presence.
She's wonderful. And, she was, everybody in the 70s, after coming off a series, would have not an easy time of it. And I know she tried to do movies, which she did not do successfully with Skyjacked. And ultimately, Making Love? Was that the name of it? She was naked in it. I remember that. Anyway, it's her and Michael Ontkean, I think. But if she had been Tabitha, but they had it was her. I remember I did read with Susan Hubley, who also would have been great. But the network thought they should have a Rhoda type. Even though if you look at the original little girl who played Tabitha, she is stunningly gorgeous today. Erin Murphy, stunning. Yes. It was her birthday yesterday. I sent her a Facebook birthday message saying, "Happy birthday, sis." And I said, "I was your brother, in the original." And I know very well the actor who did it after me, who replaced me, David Ankrum. I have a picture of all us Adams, the kid who played it on the show, me, and David Ankrum.
Wow.
All the Adams in one photo.
Yes.
But I think we didn't sell because nobody wanted Rhoda, on Tabitha. And it was a mistake. She's a good actress, the woman who did it. It wasn't the right chemistry. And they also made her, which I liked, and I wish they had kept it for the series, they made her not want to be a witch. And me, so I got all the fun stuff. I was like, I got to do the walk through walls and disappear and appear. Mm-hmm. So I had a good time. It was fun to do, and it's on the DVD of the series. They put it on there. So
Now we've mentioned Susan. Should we move on to Partridge Family?
Of course.
I'd want to talk about Kritzerland later because I find that fascinating. Of the characters that you played in the Partridge Family, you had Freddie and Marvin and Richard and Howard. Did you call on real people to create those characters, to bring those personalities to life?
Only myself. I'm not that kind. I was never that kind of an actor. I'm the kind of an actor. People ask me, what's a good actor? And I said, the actors who show up, know their lines, hit their marks, and go eat.
Okay.
That to me is a fine actor and gets the job done. You know, I worked for years and years and years in television, and I used to get upset that directors never said anything to me. And I was always petrified that I wasn't good enough. And I finally went to a director, and I don't think it was on Partridge Family, but maybe it was actually because I was more comfortable there. But I finally went to somebody and said, "Why don't you ever give me direction?" What? He said, "Because you're doing a good job. Why would I give you a note?" I said, "Oh, okay, so I'm good then." So, but no, I was always, you know, a kind of nerdy boy. And I was known for, I guess, for it because they used to ask for my types if I wasn't available. But no, I don't understand actors who do all this stuff and become the thing. You know, I was funny, and I guess, and I did it, and that was it. You know, I just think if you're honest on film, I learned that lesson in my first TV show, what the difference between, I learned it kind of the hard way, I guess. Because I had tested for one pilot when I started doing professional work. Didn't get it, but it was between me and another guy. I got very far my first time out. Just gotten an agent. I was sent for the lead in a Warner Brothers pilot. And it was me and another guy, and the other guy got it, and it didn't sell. So, but the next job I got was a guest shot on a series called The Young Lawyers. I had not done, other than this little test film, but the director, I think, liked me in a special way, but he was very enamored of me because I was cute. And so I got it, and it was like shaking. I was petrified, didn't know what the hell was going on. I learned all my lines perfect, and the actors were so at ease. It was Gary Lockwood was a guest on it, and he just kind of took me under his wing. And there was they used to have on TV shows dialogue directors, whose job was to run lines. And he and Gary Lockwood took me under their wing and said, just don't be nervous about anything. All you have to do is look people in the eye and mean what you say. And they just calmed me down like nothing, nobody's business. And I took to it. I always thought I was terrible in that show, you know, because I'd only seen it only aired once. And I thought, oh, God, terrible. My posture is terrible. And so I learned to stand up straight in that show because my head actually entered a room prior to my body. So I figured I need to stand up straight because I've always had bad posture. And so, but I watched it. It came out on, how does this stuff come out on DVD? The entire series came out on DVD. It was only a season and a half, I think, or one season. And I watched it, and, you know, it wasn't half bad. It wasn't like I remembered. It wasn't like disgusting. I didn't want to run from the room or anything. And it was dramatic, which was interesting because I didn't do that very often. That was an interesting seeing myself on film. By the time I got to the Partridge Family, I had sort of gotten that part down, which is to be you, to be honest, to bring the character to you rather than trying to force something on something. Just, you know, I'm just never into that kind of. I remember one pilot, the director said, let's talk about our backstories. I said, no, my backstory is I got up this morning and I came to the studio. I said, I don't know anything beyond that. It was a scene. You know, the first one was a scene. It was one scene. What am I going to do? You know, I'm going to be me.
You walked onto that first scene as Laurie's boyfriend, Freddie. You were just like the boys we were at school with.
For better or worse, yes.
No. In that way that they're so nervous to meet your mother, and then your brother sits and kind of grills you and
puts his arm around you.
It was just perfect, and you just seemed to have a really good chemistry from the beginning. Can you remember how many times you had to do that scene?